So today we're doing a deep dive into what I think is one of the most consequential um, paradoxes in business right now. We're
Absolutely.
talking about generative AI or Gen AI.
Yeah.
Companies have poured, an estimated $30 to $40 billion into it?
A monumental bet on future efficiency.
It's an astronomical investment,
Mhm.
right? But here's the part that just floors me. This finding from MIT's Project Nanda.
It is jaw-dropping. The research shows that 95% of those enterprise AI investments are yielding zero measurable return,
Zero. Just think about that number for a second. 95%.
which means only a tiny elite 5% of organizations are actually making it work.
They're crossing the chasm, and they're not just getting a little value. They're extracting millions in quantifiable, demonstrable value. And that contrast, that huge gap, is what we're calling the Gen AI divide.
Exactly. And what's so fascinating is that this divide, it's not about access to the technology. Everyone can go and license the top models. It's an implementation gap.
This is an organizational problem.
Fundamentally, it's an organizational learning gap. So our mission for this deep dive is to, synthesize the findings from over 300 real-world AI implementations. We want to show you why most are failing and, more importantly, what those three organizational shifts are that distinguish the successful 5%.
And the stakes for you listening right now couldn't be higher. This isn't some distant future thing you can catch up on later.
No, absolutely not. The research is very clear on this. When you integrate these big systems, vendor lock-in averages about 18 months.
18 months.
Which means that window you have to get your strategy right is closing right now. It's narrowing very, very quickly. And if you wait, the first movers are gaining advantages that aren't just linear, they're exponential.
Because the systems are learning.
They're accumulating your organization's specific data, they're integrating into your workflows, and that's creating these deep competitive moats that latecomers will find almost impossible to cross.
Okay, so let's unpack that. Let's start with the 95% who are stalled out. I mean, they're certainly busy. The research says 80% of organizations have at least explored or piloted Gen AI tools.
Right, the engagement is there. It looks a lot like other big tech cycles we've seen.
But there's a huge difference between just adopting something and actually transforming the business, isn't there?
That is the crucial distinction. We're separating mere adoption from true transformation. So you see about 40% of organizations reporting they've deployed consumer-grade LLMs.
So that's like using ChatGPT to draft an email or summarize a report. Individual productivity stuff.
Exactly, that's reactive adoption. But when you try to integrate that kind of capability into a core business process, something that's meant to genuinely transform, say, your supply chain,
The story changes completely.
it does. That's where we hit what the research is calling the pilot to production chasm. When you look at those integrated, custom, enterprise-grade systems, whether you build them yourself or buy them from a vendor, the failure rate from pilot to a successful deployment is a staggering 95%.
That's so much higher than traditional software projects. I mean, we used to get worried about 50 or 70% failure rates. This is on another level. Why?
The failure points are they're remarkably consistent. And it's because enterprise workflows are just inherently messy.
Right.
So a consumer tool works fine because it's dealing with generic prompts. But these custom solutions, they just run aground on three core issues. First is what's called workflow brittleness.
Workflow brittleness. So the system works 99% of the time, but it's that 1%, that weird edge case that just shatters it.
Precisely. Imagine an AI that's processing invoices. It's great with standard formats, but then a regional vendor sends one in with a unique layout, maybe a special tax field. The static system, it's only been trained on generic data, so it can't handle that one critical difference. The whole workflow stalls, and it's back to manual entry. That's brittleness.
Which leads right into the second problem, right? The integration complexity. The classic last mile headache.
Exactly. The AI model itself might be brilliant, but getting its output into your ERP system or your CRM, it's a nightmare of configuration and patching. The cost of that last mile just kills the ROI.
And the third one, which I think is the most important, is static performance. The AI just doesn't get any better.
It doesn't learn. And that violates the core expectation users have from the consumer tools they use every single day, which are constantly improving.
But there's this behavioral clue in the research that's just fascinating. Shadow AI.
Yes. Over 90% of organizations have employees using their personal subscriptions. They're paying their own money for ChatGPT or Claude to do their work.
Even when the company has its own official paid-for enterprise tool.
Exactly. And this shadow AI economy, it's more than just a security risk, which it is. It's incredibly valuable market intelligence that leadership is mostly ignoring.
They're voting with their wallets.
Precisely. They are signaling exactly where the authentic demand is, and they're showing you exactly where your official, slow-moving enterprise tools are failing them.
So if your pilot fails, but your employees are still solving the same problem with their own tools, that's the ultimate failure signal for your internal strategy.
The clearest signal you could ask for.
And that idea of static performance, it brings us right to the core barrier separating the 95 from the 5%. It's this thing you call the learning gap.
Yes, and this isn't about just buying a better model. It's a systemic mismatch between how users expect a system to behave and what these enterprise systems can actually do.
It's about trust, really.
Trust based on capability, absolutely. The research shows users are fine with AI for simple tasks. 70% will use it to draft an email. But for complex tasks that need judgment and memory, they want a human.
90% prefer a human colleague over an AI.
Overwhelmingly.
Okay, but hold on. If the models are powerful enough to do the initial work, why isn't the solution just to train users better? Teach them how to feed the AI the right context. Why is it the system's fault?
That's a great question, but the fault really lies in the architecture. These enterprise tools are designed as static inference engines.
You give it an input, it gives you an output. That's it.
There's no memory between interactions, and crucially, there's no way for it to integrate feedback. You can correct its mistake today, but tomorrow it makes the exact same mistake again.
So the problem isn't the raw quality of the output. It's the system's inability to build organizational memory. It can't learn from its own mistakes.
Exactly. And the corporate lawyer anecdote from the research illustrates this perfectly. Her firm spent $50,000 on a specialized contract analysis tool.
A big investment.
A huge investment. Yet she kept going back to her personal ChatGPT subscription for drafting clauses.
Why? Why use the consumer tool over the expensive specialized one?
Her words were she could guide the conversation and iterate with the consumer tool. It wasn't perfect, but she could course correct it in real time, and it at least remembered the context within that single conversation. The expensive vendor tool was just a static function. It couldn't adapt.
You couldn't remember her preferences or negotiation style?
Or her corrections for future use. But then for the really high-stakes, multi-million-dollar contracts, she didn't trust either of them.
She went to a human colleague.
She went to a human. Because that colleague accumulates knowledge. They remember that client A hates this clause, or that client B always insists on that term. They learn. The enterprise AI couldn't do that. That inability to build up a history is the core barrier.
That sets the stage perfectly. So if the core problem is this inability to learn, how does the successful 5% break that mold? It can't just be that they have better tech.
No, it's a completely different mindset, and it starts with how they buy these tools in the first place. This brings us to the 3 shifts. Shift number 1 is a fundamental change in how you acquire this tech. Strategic partnership over internal development.
So the old, not invented here mentality, building it all yourself for a competitive edge, that's the wrong move.
It's costing 95% of companies dearly. The data is just unambiguous here. Strategic partnerships with specialized AI vendors succeed at about twice the rate of internal builds.
So 66% success for partnerships versus 33% for internal.
Exactly.
Why are those internal builds failing so badly, even with huge budgets?
A few reasons. Internal teams, no matter how good they are, they just lack the specialization advantage. A vendor sees data across dozens of clients, dozens of implementations. Your internal team only sees your data.
And I imagine hiring is a bottleneck.
A huge bottleneck. Plus, you get cultural resistance to iterating quickly, so the time to value is just terrible. A top startup can get you deployed in 90 days. An internal build can take 9 months just to get staffed and scoped.
So the smart companies realize the value isn't in building the model, it's in mastering the workflow integration.
Precisely. They're not buying based on feature lists or price. They're buying based on trust, integration depth, and a demonstrated ability for the tool to continuously improve. They structure their pilots as 90-day partnerships with clear outcome-based metrics.
Okay, that makes sense. So shift 2 is more about culture and control. It's empowered distributed adoption.
Yes, you have to push this capability out into the organization, not hoard it in the center.
Because the centralized AI teams, the centers of excellence, they often don't actually know where the real problems are.
They lack the domain knowledge.
Yeah.
The 5% understand that AI integration requires a deep frontline understanding of the workflow friction.
And you had a great example of this, the mid-market manufacturing firm.
Right. They skipped the big top-down mandate entirely. Instead, they just found their power users.
The people already using shadow AI.
The ones already experimenting and having success, they legitimized it. They gave these domain experts small, decentralized budgets, maybe $25,000, to pilot tools that solved their immediate pain points.
So they weren't trying to build one giant solution. They were funding lots of small, targeted experiments at the edges of the company.
Exactly. And they got these rapid wins in really specific areas like procurement and quality assurance because those teams knew their workflows better than any central IT team ever could.
And that brings us to the third shift, which addresses this massive misallocation of resources, prioritizing back-office automation.
Yes, there is a huge visibility bias in corporate spending.
Sales and marketing get all the money.
They get about 50% of the GenAI investment, and it's because their KPIs are very visible to the C-suite pipeline growth conversions. But the back-office functions deliver a much clearer, more measurable ROI.
Which makes sense. I mean, those tasks are high volume, they're rule-based, they're repetitive. It's the perfect ground for automation.
It is. We're not talking about automating complex judgment here. We're talking about automating highly structured data movement. Things like contract classification, APR reconciliation, regulatory reporting.
So what's an example of that hidden ROI?
Well, look at the Fortune 500 consumer packaged goods company we analyzed. They rolled out an AI tool for spend categorization, just that one thing.
Okay.
It processed millions of transactions, found all this vendor spend that was misclassified and scattered. That single shift saved them $1.8 million a year in external consulting fees.
Wow.
And it freed up an entire procurement team to stop pushing invoices and start doing strategic supplier management. That ROI is clean, it's documented, and it's way better than some fuzzy sales KPI. The 5% are ruthless about this. They pursue operational efficiency where the metrics are objective.
So to sustain this, the 5% aren't just buying software. They're building completely different system architectures.
Yes, systems designed from the ground up for continuous learning. That's how they future-proof their investment. It's the direct antidote to the static systems trapping everyone else.
So what does that look like? What are the design principles?
There are 3 core principles. First, persistent memory. The system has to retain context across sessions and users.
So it solves the lawyer's problem. If I correct the AI today, it remembers that correction next week.
Exactly. And that leads to the second principle, structured feedback integration. It's not enough to just remember. The system needs a mechanism to incorporate that feedback, your correction or your preference, and use it to automatically improve its future performance.
It turns user complaints into training data.
It turns friction into fuel. And the third principle is contextual adaptation, which solves that brittleness problem. The system has to know what it doesn't know.
So it can adjust its confidence level.
Yeah. Right. If it sees a routine invoice, it processes it with 99% confidence. If it hits that weird regional tax form, that edge case, its confidence drops, and it immediately flags it for a human to review. The workflow never breaks.
These 3 principles, it seems like they're the foundation for something much, much bigger than just a better tool.
They are. This is the underpinning of what's emerging as the agentic web.
The agentic web.
We're seeing new technical protocols emerge, things like the agent-to-agent or A2A framework that provide the foundation for autonomous systems to discover, integrate, and coordinate with each other.
Not just inside one company, but across company boundaries, without a human in the loop.
Without human mediation, the coordination mechanism is shifting from a person directing software to protocols that let the systems transact and exchange information on their own.
It sounds like a historical shift from a hierarchy to a network.
That's a perfect analogy. We're moving from centralized authority to decentralized protocols for coordination. And this is why that GenAI divide is so critical right now. The companies that master continuous learning today are literally building the architecture they need to participate in the agentic web tomorrow.
Okay, so let's sum up this deep dive. The $40 billion paradox is real. It's driven by a 95% failure rate, rooted in systems that can't learn. To cross that divide, to join the 5%, the research points to 3 decisive shifts.
First, stop buying static, inference-only tools. You have to demand systems built for continuous learning with persistent memory and feedback integration. Second, embrace strategic partnerships over trying to build it all yourself. And third, you've got to prioritize that back office automation where the ROI is clear and measurable.
So the GenAI divide isn't a technology gap. It's an organizational learning gap. And that 18-month lock-in window is closing fast.
And here's the final thought for you to consider. The successful 5%, they're actively preparing for this agentic web where autonomous systems coordinate without direct human oversight. So ask yourself this. If your competitors' AI systems are learning every single day, accumulating client preferences, negotiation tactics, your internal procedures, what is the compounding cost of your systems remaining static? The real challenge isn't just automation. It's adapting your entire organization to enable continuous machine learning before the machines start operating autonomously across the internet and leave you behind completely.